So this show is actually extremely good. I think some of you need to calm down, because some people are saying it's already better than Haikyuu, to which I gotta say, chill. It's just starting, but I do think it's very good. But with that said, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly Remain discussion videos. Today we're here to talk all about episode 2, I'm No Prodigy, but before we get into that, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AniTube know that you're here. And with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode. And there is a lot I want to talk about this week. A lot. This is like the first time in a while I've had enough topics to fill up a discussion video to the point where I don't even think we're going to get to design time today. In fact, I mean not to. There's just too much to talk about. Too many things, and my brain's a little too scattershot right now. So instead, we're just going to talk about the episode like we used to back before design time. That said, probably going to do a design time on the characters in general, like at some point, just because you guys know I love talking about designs. I think it's super fun. But for now, there's so much other stuff going on that I want to talk about. And I really want to focus in on the big dynamic I noticed between the MC and Chinu. It even goes beyond that, honestly. I think Minato as an MC is very well equipped for this type of story. I think what Mappa's trying to do here is to give you the usual like sports anime formula of like a bunch of dudes who care about their sport a whole lot and maybe even each other, and you know, ships ensue. Although I will say the addition of Chinu is a bit of a surprise. I feel like I noticed a lot of people on Twitter going like, oh, Mappa, I don't think you understand how this thing works. Right, a lot of my fellow Fujoshi and Fudanshi being like, no, that's not really why we watch the sports anime. We watch sports anime because there's a lot of undertones to the idea of the team, right? So throwing Chinu in there is just like, oh, you're missing prime opportunity for giving the boy some bi ideas, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, he still could be. He's just, you know, into Chinu. He might be into some of the other characters. We'll have to wait and see. That said, even if it is just Chinu, and this is going against my Fudanshi side, but even if it is just Chinu that he's into, I'm okay with that, because Chinu's super cool, like right away, and sets up his journey in a really fun and interesting way. And I already kind of ship these two, but keep that low key. But I do think Minato and Chinu actually have like a good amount of chemistry, despite only really speaking for the third time by the time we get to episode 2. Like, they've only spoken 2 other times prior to that. And yet there is like an immediate chemistry. Like, you see like when the two of them meet for the first time and he like drops his towel near her, right? And she's like, oh, don't you forgot this. And he's like, oh yeah, thanks. But it was literally just an opportunity for him to talk to her clearly. And then later on, he basically confesses his feelings, that he's liked her ever since, and that he, if he becomes the best water polo player in the world, that she owes him a kiss, right? And she says that if he continued to be the best, like that he made another promise that if he continued to be the best, that if he became the best in Japan, then they would date, right? But if he lost, then he would owe her, I think it was like 220,000 yen or something like that. Something crazy, some big number where it's like basically over $2,000 in Canada, right? So like that's what I assume the translation between yen would be, which is a lot. That's a lot of money. And obviously, you know, he doesn't really have the funds to pay for that. So he kind of panics, right? And this once again sort of sets him back on his journey to become an expert tier water polo player again. And I think the bet and his dynamic with Chinu really sort of propels him back into it. The only reason we see him join the water polo team isn't because he's rekindled that flame. It's because he doesn't want to owe Chinu that amount of money. And maybe he low-key wants to take that girl out on a date, which I can respect. But yeah, Minato definitely has a long road ahead of him. I think the character is at least very aware of how steep of a learning curve he's about to face. And I mentioned this last week, but it bears repeating that Minato as an MC is actually capable of something that, of avoiding something rather, that bothers me in other sports anime. And that's the whole prodigy thing, right? Like, the episode is called I'm No Prodigy. Prodigy. Words. Bad at them. But he explains that he's no prodigy. And he's right? Like, so he had all those skills and he has lost them. He has to unlock, like he now has to unlock them, right? He has to relearn them all. So he has to go through and unlock all of these old skills and talents that he used to have. And we see it kind of come to him this week. Like, it sort of comes back. But you can tell just by the questions he's asking and, like, his skill in the water and all this stuff that it's starting to come back. It's like he's shaking the cobwebs off, but there's so many cobwebs that he's probably going to be shaking that stuff off for quite a while. I imagine it won't be till, like, the end of the season that he fully unlocks all his old skills. And that is a lot more interesting than the character is just very good at the sport. Like, there's a lot of anime that, even ones that I love, like Haikyuu and Free, where the people are just very good out the jump, right? Given a character, like, let's take a look at, like, a character like Hinata, right? Like, Hinata has a base level skill, but he also has to work insanely hard. Like, Hinata's one of the most hardworking sports protagonists I can think of. Sports anime protagonists that I can remember, right? Like, he works very, very hard, but even he had some latent talent, right? With Free, Haru just kind of takes to water, right? Now that adds to Haru's character, but in other anime, it really doesn't. I can think of a few different sports series where they just sort of like take to the sport, and it's like, it's written away as just, oh, they had a natural talent for it. And I always find that kind of boring. Whereas with Remain, the instant that we see him start to unlock these old skills, it's not that he is this, like, he had this latent talent. He did, like, it was there, but there's an explanation for it, and it makes sense, and it actually works to only improve his character arc and to make the show all the more interesting. And I think that that's really cool. I think Minato as an MC is legitimately very strong. The fact that this show only has, like, a 7 on Mal, by the way, that's sad. This show needs an 8, based solely off Minato, because I think he's such a great MC, and the show's pitch where, like the idea of the accident is so clever and works in so many ways. I don't know, I just think it's great. However, there's not just Minato this week. There's also the whole forming the team thing. And I like that we actually get to see the different characters be maybe even a little selfish, right? My favorite character so far, as if you needed me to say this, is Joe. Joe, I think, is so fun and so cool. And admittedly, just a touch selfish. We see him actually place a bunch of paper on a bunch of different classroom desks. We can assume it was more than just Minato's class, that it was like a lot of different classrooms because a lot of students show up later. And it basically just says that, like, this is after Minato says that he'll join the team because he doesn't want to pay Chinu in their bet, right? So he places these papers on the desk, so since he knows that he's going to join the team, saying that Minato's on the team, and if you want to go to nationals, then you should come with us because he's going to carry us the whole way and all this stuff. And it makes a lot of people who just sort of want to join what do they call them? Like a side sport or something like that? I can't remember what they call water polo in the show, but it's basically almost a bit of an insult where they say, like, it's not as intense, nor is it as well regarded as the other sports, like, you know, baseball, basketball, volleyball, all that fun stuff. Hockey, if you're Canadian, but definitely not in Japan. Although that said, we are getting that hockey anime in Japan soon, or from Japan soon. So, you know, I mean, it's an anime. Where else would it come from? You know what I mean? I'm excited for the hockey anime. It's taking its sweet time getting here. But yeah, you see the different people sort of react to the idea of going to nationals, right? Uninterested in water polo just for the sake of going to nationals so that they can be cool and well regarded, right? And Joe did that knowingly, you know, like he knew that would get a crowd going, but he was unaware that Minato felt very much like uncomfortable with the idea of going of trying to take these people to nationals, like considering that he doesn't remember anything and there is no like secret skills that he has no memory of water polo. He barely remembers how to play, let alone like actually how to maneuver his way through the pool. Like he's completely out of his depth. But Joe, unaware of that, acts a bit selfish and then feels bad about it later. And I think that goes a long way to show that these characters are human. You know, like these characters are going to make a lot of mistakes and they are going to hurt each other every once in a while, but it's not out of malice. You know, like Joe didn't do that to be a jerk. Joe did that because he wanted to fill out the team. And when we see later that he was like the only senior member on the team, that there is nobody else on the water polo team and that there hadn't been a water polo team in like 10 years. And then when he did find enough people to actually join, they ended up leaving shortly after. So he spent his first year just cleaning the pool and practicing on his own. And that's really sad. You know, it's really, really sad. But it also goes a long way into explaining why Joe did the thing that he did, why Joe put out those flyers and tried to get so many people, because this is all he's wanted to do. If I might reference Haikyuu again and Hinata again, Joe is a lot like Hinata. He just wants to play one match, where Hinata like forces his friends to play volleyball with them or with him, and they go up against Kageyama's team. Even though the situation's different, the two characters do remind me a lot of each other, right? Like Joe does give me big Hinata Shoyo vibes, and that is very much a positive thing. In fact, the more I think about it, a lot of the characters give me big like references to other characters. The dude from Nigeria gives me big Makoto vibes, right? Like big Makoto vibes from Free, Makoto Tachibana. He's this big, tall dude who's really sweet and innocent, like just big Makoto vibes. Caring and nice, and I'm not gonna lie, I was like, damn, that dude's pretty. That dude's really, really pretty. So yeah, that dude definitely gave me Makoto vibes. And we even get like an Ikuya type, which is another Free reference, where there's the quiet guy who sort of feels like a cross between Ikuya from Free and Japan from Hitalia, like in how quick he speaks. But he's like really shy and quiet. Like he did give me big Ikuya vibes from Starting Days. And I guess to an extent Dive to the Future. But yeah, there was two characters who definitely gave me vibes of like other sports characters. Even the red-haired guy, Ajiri, definitely gave me like the boastful, cocky type of like archetype for a sports series. I can't think of any characters off the top of my head. He actually, the more I think about it, kind of reminded me of Asahi, not from Haikyuu, but from Free. A lot of Free references here, by the way. But like, and I'm going to talk about another one in a bit. But there's a lot of like the team coming together felt very like, yeah, like it gave me flashes to other characters from other sports anime. But what I liked is that they all had like their ulterior motives, right? You see my boy, what's his name? Yutaka, our Makoto for the evening. He has his, like, you could tell, like, he like his example, the Ikuya guy's example, like, everybody has, like, their own reasons for being there. Like, they've all tried other sports, and just for one reason or another, it just didn't work out. And so here they find themselves at the, at the water polo team, where they actually sort of feel like they belong. Even that dude, Ajiri, he wanted to play, I believe it was baseball or basketball, I don't remember. He wanted to play another sport, I believe it was baseball, where he was good, but he wasn't as good as the other players, and even the players on the bench, so they ended up just like not having him. And so his whole reason for joining the water polo team wasn't because he was good at water polo, but because he just wanted to belong to a strong team. And that kind of breaks my heart. Like, it's like legitimately very sad. And you see all, like, the reason why all these people are coming together, right? Like, later on in the episode, when Minato actually gets a point in, it just has to be on Ajiri, sorry. Keep in mind that I said Eiji, but he gets a point in on Ajiri, and it sort of gives Ajiri, like, PTSD of, like, being, like, kicked from the team, and it causes him to sort of doubt himself. And he feels bad that the only reason he wanted to play water polo was because he felt like, because it was sort of this side sport by comparison to all these other bigger sports, he felt like he could very easily become an ace, and that made him feel bad that he did that. Like, you can tell, like, he was self-conscious about his own decisions, and he felt like he made himself come across like a jerk, which he totally didn't. Like, it's more than okay. And even Joe says, like, dude, don't go. Like, it's fine. Like, you might actually become really good at it. And immediately I started to be like, so Joe and Ajiri is going to be the ship. But it was cool. I think seeing these different characters come from different backgrounds and different environments, and they've all had either their own sports or their own academic issues. it's really interesting, and I can already see like the bonds forming between them, and I'm really, really, really curious to see how the show handles that all going forward. I think it's gonna be really fun. Like I think the team itself is already really strong, and I don't know. I'm really excited, especially knowing that we have one more to go, that we have one more character, and then by the time we get to episode 3, we basically have the whole team. Like that's super, super cool. I can't wait. But there is a few other things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about some possible references that I noticed throughout this episode. And when I say references, I mean probably not actual references, but things that I noticed that my dumb fandom brain went like, is this a reference to this? It's probably not, but I'm gonna talk about them anyway. So the first one, Jojima Joe is just a JoJo's reference. Like 100% just a JoJo's reference. Like I've already made the joke about the fact that I'm like, oh, he has my name. He's a JoJo. He's a Joestar, right? He literally says at one point, oh my god! His name is Jojima Joe. JoJo. And he shouts, oh my god, like Joseph Joestar. He's a JoJo. Like at that point, I'm like, he's a walking JoJo's reference. Like Mappa is referencing JoJo's. I refuse to believe otherwise. That is what is happening. Like they are referencing Joseph Joestar, and I am here for it. Like I am down. The other reference. This one is one that my partner pointed out when we were watching, because I didn't even connect the dots on this. And then once they pointed it out, I was like, oh shit, that's such a good point. And that is Agery. Sounds a lot like AG, and he's got a sort of discount shorter haircut. And I was like, oh shit, because don't forget who made Banana Fish, right? So I was like, Agery, and he's got the discount shorter haircut. AG, shorter. It's a Banana Fish reference. It's probably not, but I'm gonna pretend like it is, because that makes me very happy. And then the other one, the last reference that I could think of. Let me know if there's anything else, by the way, because I'm positive I'm missing things. Like, because people in the comments last week pointed out things that I didn't even catch, like that could be references to other things. This whole, you know what? Let me talk about this reference, and then I'll talk about why I think that these might be references. But the biggest one, to me, is a nod to Ray from Free, and maybe not intentionally, but it certainly came across that way. Because the final guy that they have their eye on, right, their 7th player that they need in order to open up the water polo club officially and enter tournaments and stuff, is a former swimmer who they are eyeing up for their water-based sport, but they are currently on the track team. Ray from Free was eyed up by Nagisa for their water-based sport, but was already on the track team. That to me felt very much like that is either a wink and a nod or a supreme coincidence. And I'm not saying it's like not a coincidence. It totally could be. But there's a lot of, like, it's a water-based sport that is very clearly aping off the success and popularity of Free. Come on. Come on, son. Like, that's very clearly a nod, and I hope it is. I really hope it is, because there's so many things in this show so far that feel like winks and nods, either to past Mappa works or to things that Mappa likes, which you can't tell me Mappa doesn't like JoJo's. There's a lot of JoJo vibes in some Mappa works. But the biggest one to me that I didn't notice last week that a lot of people pointed out is there's a lot of nods to other sports anime. And whether that's tropes just rearing their head, because sports anime, much like shonen anime or shoujo anime, has a ton of tropes that sort of just reappear, not so much as references, but just by the very nature of their being. Or they are references, right? Like, or they are references, or they're total coincidence. But I do think that the fact that there's so much, like, shared blood between these different shows. I think that's what makes sports anime so fun for me, is I can pinpoint the references and the tropes and all that stuff. I love tropes. Like, tropes are fun, right? Tropes make consuming media very easy, because you could be like, oh, it does this trope, and people could be like, I love those tropes, I'm in, right? And then you see what they do with those tropes, because having a trope is one thing, making it interesting and fun is another. And I think Remain takes a lot of the sports anime tropes and a lot of references and nods to other things, or again, maybe just coincidences, but it takes these elements that you might have seen before in other things, but sort of spins them in a way that you haven't quite seen. Especially with a sport like water polo, which I have to say, I was one of the people in the show who were being a jerk. I would have been one of like the players who just, or not players, but one of the students who scoffed at the idea of water polo, because I've never played. And water polo, honestly, to me, always seemed kind of dorky. Honestly seemed like kind of a rich kid sport, if I'm super honest, because I guess I just associated water polo with the rich kids from the OC. If anybody remembers the OC, it's my favorite live action TV show. I don't know if anybody remembers it, but the douchey rich kids all played water polo in that, so that's sort of how I know it. That said, Luke does become a good guy later on, and I love him, but we're not here to talk about the OC. Water polo as a sport to me has always seemed kind of dorky and like a rich kid thing. So I didn't have the highest respect for it, like I probably should have. Because one of the beautiful things about sports anime is it can kind of open my eyes to a lot of the pitfalls and struggles of most sports anime, right? It can even, or most sports, I should say. I'm a little bit, obviously more interested in the anime side of the sports anime, but I do love the genre. If you guys don't know, it's like my second favorite genre outside of like shonen series. But one of the things I think sports anime does well is it shines a spotlight on sports that you either didn't know about, like kabaddi, or makes you more interested in sports that you already didn't really like much. In this case, water polo. I did not realize how tough it was. Again, watching this with my partner, we both went like, oh my god, that must be really difficult. Like that, like the fact that Minato has to like tread water and hold the ball in one hand and then kind of like try to tread water with his other, and then is later told to use both hands to throw. How are you treading water? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's like an egg, like they tell him to like kick your legs like an egg beater. So he has to like spin his legs and then throw. And the amount of like physical strength that must take, because at all times you're moving, right? Like, I assumed that the water polo pool would be shallow, but no, like they're not standing the whole time, they're swimming the whole time, they're treading water the entire time they're playing, and they have to whip a ball through the air and try to get into a net. Meanwhile, the keepers have to like blast out of the air and catch the friggin' thing, like, and stop it from going in. So everybody's exerting all this energy to the point where I'm baffled that people don't just pass out in the water more often. In fact, I'm sure it must be a problem, right? We see Minato get a cramp and he like sinks at one point. And I was genuinely like really shocked by how much effort goes into water polo that I just didn't know. And I feel bad now that I doubted water polo. Like, I had no idea it was so intense and so freaking cool. Like, it's actually kind of cool. Like, I'm like, I know the Olympics are coming up. Your boy might watch the water polo event if it exists. I don't know if it's an event at the Olympics, but I'd friggin' watch it. Let me know in the comments if it is. But yeah, I'd watch, because I'm genuinely sort of like shocked at how interesting it is. I feel really bad now. Jojo is right, man. Like, water polo is the way, and shame on us for only liking the cool sports, because water polo is that's where it's at. However, I think the Speedos are hilarious. The Speedo thing is really funny to me. I get why they're wearing Speedos, but man, that's funny. Every time I see Speedos, I just think of Ray from Free, in like episode 3 where he has to wear the Speedos. But I think of Ray, and the other thing is those helmet things are so dorky. Oh my god, they are so dorky. Like, that is the dorkiest thing. Like, when you see them in the opening, I'm like, oof, you are not making this look cool. It's still a cool sport, but man, those helmets are dorky looking. Like, that is dorky. That is dorky. Like, by comparison, and again, maybe it's just my Canadian coming out, hockey helmets look awesome, right? Like, hockey helmets look cool as hell. Football helmets are cool too, and I'm not a football guy, but I think football helmets look cool. Water polo helmets look really dorky. Like, really, really dorky. I put them up there with, like, biking helmets. It's just kind of like, not like biker helmets, but like, you know, like bicycle helmets as being kind of dorky looking, I'm not gonna lie. But again, I'm not trying to knock water polo. I do think it's actually a really cool sport, and I'm interested in, like, actually learning about it as we go, because we still don't know many of the rules, and we barely know how to play yet. I will say they were throwing a lot of names and stuff at me that I wasn't familiar with, like keeper and shooter, but I could kind of get where they were going with it. But yeah, I'm just excited to learn. I'm like excited to learn. I'm excited to know more about these characters. The cast is absolutely fire so far, and I cannot wait to meet the seventh and final guy in the 3rd episode. It's gonna be super hype. But with that said, everybody, that is gonna wrap up today's video here. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and set notifications to all. Let all of AniTube know that you're here. And before we go, as always, I want to give a big, big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people. Look at all these beautiful names. And hey, if you'd like to join these beautiful people, there are 2 ways to do so. The first, for just $1, is by hitting that Patreon link in the description, or you could check out that join button right beside the sub button to get a badge next to your name and some emotes to spam in the comments. It is a little bit more if you go the join route because you get a little bit more stuff, but either way, you get your name scrolling past the screen. Either way, super helpful. Super, super helpful, and big thank you once again to the good folks in the T Squadron. And that is pretty much it for me. I'm gonna go. I'm also gonna go look up if water polo is in the Olympics this year. When is the Olympics? It's soon, right? Anyway, bye!